Okay, so good morning, everybody. Friday before Memorial Day, so I appreciate everybody coming here. We have a terrific guest with us, Dr. Vince Young from the Department of Microbiology and Immunology. And he is going to be talking to Julie Boulanger, who is a postdoc in anesthesiology on the topic of mentoring for career success. So it's going to be their show. So take it off.
It's going to be your show.
Oh, yes. I thought we would start by just a quick introduction of Dr. Young here. So he is originally from Buffalo, New York, and after completing his undergrad studies at MIT, he obtained an MD and a PhD from Stanford University. He completed his residency and fellowship at the Massachusetts General Hospital, followed by 4 years of postdoctoral training at the MIT. And he started his lab as a Spartan at MIT in 2001, I saw that. And then he moved to the University of Michigan in 2007. So his lab is studying the gut microbiome, its interaction with pathogenic bacteria, and the role of microbiome on the pathogen-host interaction. Got that right.
Got it.
And according to his Twitter feed, even his car
How's it been
identification plate is referring to the microbiome. Among the multiple awards he has received, I wanted to point out that he was the 2017 Michard Distinguished Clinical and Translational Research Mentor Award recipient. And he's also a musician, a keyboardist playing live rock and roll and some jazz music. So thank you again for coming to talk to us about mentoring and nurturing trainees for successful careers. And I will start by asking a few questions and open the floor for questions. That's okay?
Okay.
So if I counted properly, you have advised 13 graduate students and 12 postdocs in your career so far. I would imagine that they've gone to a diversity of career. What is your philosophy in terms of mentoring? Do you aim at giving all your mentees the same common ground scientific base? Or do you tailor your mentoring to what they want to do afterwards?
It's a little bit like my kids asking me, who do you like better? I think my role as a mentor is really to kind of find or help the mentee find out who they are and who they want to be. Because the things that I do for someone who wants one career are going to be different. And that's something that's developed over time. You know, as you pointed out, I've been playing this game for a long time now. And I still feel like I just started my lab, but it's been a while. And I've found out that, you know, some mentees, even if they want the same career, need different things. So I try to establish that kind of relationship where we're both figuring out how we work together, what we expect of each other, how we can both learn together. And that's been different for basically every single training that I've had.
And is it something that you so that you really built over time as a trial and error, or do you try to have kind of an initial discussion to set a ground with, like, you know, what are your career goals and this type of questions?
I have a few of my mentees in the room, and they're probably all cringing right now because I have tried to become more formal in how we do that. Some of it is through like the more mentoring. I do actually have both my graduate students and my postdocs try to attend those mentoring sessions on main campus with me, because I think it establishes a good base of figuring expectations, figuring out what are the opportunities, not just within my laboratory group, but at the University of Michigan in general. And it's good to kind of start out on that foot. I found it, at least personally, I found it to be useful. My mentees may have a different opinion, and I even let them express those other opinions too. Funny that. Now they're all cringing over there.
How do you find resources and mentors for trainees who have different career goals than your path?
Yeah. I sort of have an ongoing joke that when one of my academic colleagues makes some comment about how we have to be better at training our trainees in pursuing alternative careers, I said, oh, you mean like the one that we do? Because being an academic scientist is actually in some ways the alternative career, because there are so many more people that we train who don't go into that field. So I think that we would be doing a disservice if we weren't from day one realizing that most of our trainees are not necessarily going to be doing what we're doing as the trainers. So because of that, and as you go on in time, I have a lot of resources in terms of people who are not academic scientists. And so I've tried to leverage that fairly early to try to get people to, exposed to that. So
How did you find those researchers initially?
mostly because they are my fellow trainees from back when I was in graduate school. They've gone off to do other things, and so you establish that network. One of the things that I try to do is that networking is important. We're at meetings. I had to point out, and now I warn people when you go to meetings, if I see you across the room and I do this, I don't expect you to just wave back. What I'm really doing, without being obvious, is there's a person here I want you to meet,
Okay.
just because of that. And that's also an extension. So if I see you at a meeting, I do. That's what I'm doing.
So you're really actively introducing your
Yeah.
mentees to other people.
I think that's something that I also learned, not necessarily the hard way, but when I was establishing my career at MSU, partially because I had trained at Research One, in particular tertiary medical center kind of places, and as a physician scientist, when I went to MSU, I kind of went off the grid a little bit, not as far as the research, because the basic research there is fabulous, but as far as and this is something that's important for me, the translational aspects, the healthcare aspects weren't, that wasn't quite the circle there. And so there were a number of people who said, man, you almost disappeared. And the network that you establish while you're trying to go both through your training and the early parts of your career is very important. And you would like to think that if you're doing good things, it'll get recognized no matter what. But if you have other people that are helping others realize the good work that you're doing,
Yeah.
that's important as well. So, which is why I do this.
Would anyone want to ask questions? I have a whole list, so I can continue, but maybe you can open the floor a little bit.
And it can be anything.
So would you say that attending conferences is really important for trainees? And if so, if it's more than one a year, how do you approach, or how do you help them find funding for travel?
Well, I think we're very fortunate here at the University of Michigan that there are funds for travel. The comments I got from two of my trainees was, boy, that was fast. Within less than half a day after submitting the request, there was money for travel to go, in one case, to an international meeting, in another case, to a national meeting. And I'm also fortunate that I also have funds that contribute to that, because that's only part of it. So I think going to meetings is really important. And going to more than one a year would be nice, but I think that working with your mentor to decide relatively early what you want to do will help you decide what kind of meetings to go to. I have sort of, for my graduate students, I sort of have a kind of a plan that seems to work out over the years. I've tried to send them to their first meeting as soon as I can get them to have something to present. Is one of these gigantic meetings, you and 10,000 of your closest friends. But the reason to do that is to show sort of the breadth of what's available in their area. And, for me, for microbiology, I'll send them to ASM Microbe or to Infectious Diseases Week in some cases. But even before that, we try to plan and come up with your dance card. This is where you're going to go, because it's hard to just show up and go, all right, there are 25 concurrent sessions. I have no idea which one to go to. So we plan that before we go. And the reason to go to that meeting, again, is to kind of show the breadth of what's available. And then after that, a meeting to go to should be something that's a smaller, maybe more specialized, especially as you're moving on and potentially looking for jobs or postdocs or something after graduate school. Meetings that have between 50 and maybe 300 people are useful for that, and they're in a closer, more narrowly focused area. And I think that's useful. But that doesn't work for everyone, because some people, they just want to stay broad the whole time because they really aren't sure where they want to go and they want to explore a number of things. And that's fine. Go to 2 huge meetings then, 3 of those. Other questions? Or everyone's just thinking about hot dogs?
What is a dance card?
What is a dance card? Does anyone know the history of that?
Well, I don't know the history, I know what a dance card is.
Yeah, what is a dance card?
So-
It actually goes back it's even older than me.
So it's like ladies at balls would have these cards attached to their sleeve or something like that, and when gentlemen suitors would come up and ask for a dance, they would write the name on the card, so you didn't like catch them at the wrong time or something. So if your dance card was full, it was like,
Yeah,
too
your
bad.
dance card's full, sorry.
Far too popular to fit you in.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
and then you could save that as a memento of all the gentlemen suitors that you.
Yes.
I have a question.
About dance cards?
No. That was a great explanation.
That was the perfect explanation.
Yeah, it's very informative.
Yeah.
Do you have a formal annual review with your trainees? Or is it something that's more informal and ongoing? Can you kind of speak to that process?
Okay, we'll open this up to the whole room. Who has an IDP in place? My trainees are raising their hands. Yeah, so does everyone know what an IDP is? Has anyone ever been asked to develop? Of those who didn't raise your hands, have you been asked to develop one?
Yes.
Yeah? But haven't?
I don't update it.
So,
Are they required now? If you're on like NIH or federal funding?
sure, there's a lot of
no
things that are
economic
required.
value.
Do we do everything that's required of us?
I do.
Wow. You looking for a laugh? No, it is required, and it should be required. So that's what I do annually. But as I also say, that the IDP isn't something that you check the box once a year. I mean, that's the requirement. You check the box once a year. It should be a living document that I try to, occasionally I'll pull it out. I don't actually, so now you guys will know sometimes that when I'm asking these questions, it's because I looked at your IDP, and it's only been a few months. And I'm like, hey, were we planning on, X, Y, Z? Because if you only check in with where your milestones and your timeline is once a year, that's probably a little sparse. So I think it's good to do it formally once a year. Go back to, what is it? Is my through my IDP, the
Science careers.
right, the science careers one is my IDP, but there's many others. I've pulled ones from other institutions too, because sometimes I find it useful to see multiple examples and hand them out to people. Find the one that kind of resonates with you that you can fill out and do. But again, that's something to do formally once a year, and it's something that you want to try to continue to do. And everyone has their different mentoring styles. I do travel a lot, as my lab will let you know, but when I'm in town, I do try to have weekly meetings with my graduate students, postdocs, and the junior faculty who are in my group. And that takes up a lot of time. I mean, people know that on Mondays and Tuesdays, they probably won't expect to see me because I'm generally trying to spend time with my lab folks one-on-one. But again, it all depends on what kind of relationship that you establish with your mentor and what your mentor is comfortable with. So that was a long-winded answer that, yeah, once a year we do that formally, but we try to continue doing that on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
How do you address concerns that you have in that yearly review?
How do my concerns or
Your
or the
concerns.
360 or my concerns?
I guess
specifically?
like if you would like to motivate your trainee to be more productive or something along those lines.
You know, that's why I don't do it at the time of the IDP. I use the IDP as sort of a way to look broadly.
Okay.
And at the same time, you know, if my concerns were only expressed once a year, that's also not doing a service to my mentees. So that's why I also try to have the weekly meetings where we kind of come up with things like, yeah, you know, we've been talking about this for a few weeks and we have to decide which path we're going to go. We can't just kind of perseverate on deciding and not making a decision. So that's how we try to do it through contact and relatively frequent contact. I mean, I was fortunate to have that with my mentors. They did sort of have an open door policy and we met, you know, relatively frequently. It wasn't like at the same time every week, but you know, we would kind of come down to about that. It wasn't formalized, but we would do that. And that's when they would say, hey, Vince, you've been talking about doing this for like 2 months. So either stop talking about it and do it, or just stop talking about it.
To build on that question, have you been in the situation in which, and if yes, how do you deal with it, in which you feel that you have a career goal of one of your mentees kind of ill-fitting to either their involvement in their training or their skills? And how do you bring up that conversation? Because you don't want to crush their dreams, but you don't want them to pursue something that seems unattainable at this point in their life.
Yeah. I think that's one of the critical roles of a mentor. I've had several trainees who have come in, and the joke we have is, you know, you really want to sit in the chair, because, you know, that's what I'm doing most of the time, sitting in a chair. But it's a nice chair because I'm sitting in it most of the time, so I made sure to get a nice chair. So you want to sit in the chair, huh? Do you know what's really involved with it? And I try to bring that up both one-on-one, but also at my group meetings. There are times that we'll have discussions where we talk about those things that we complain that, oh, we were never formally taught that. We don't know about grants. We don't know about the regulations. We don't know about finding funding. We don't know about how to find resources for trainees and things. And we try to bring that up. But as we're doing that, I try to explore with my mentees, okay, great, you have a goal. It's my job to help you find out as much as you can, and a lot of times I have to find out as well, what is really needed to attain that goal, and what is it really like when you get there? Especially if it's something not like sitting in the chair, not what I do. And then we'll oftentimes get to the point where it says, yeah, that's what I really want to do. And these are the skills that I have to attain it. These are the skills that I need to get to attain it. And then we actually have a path forward. Because it's not fair to kind of say, oh yeah, you can't do that. That's not fair, because many times I don't know if you can or can't do it. But let's try to explore together, where is it that you want to be and what will it take to get there? and what is the path that you'll go from here to get there. But there have been times where I have parted ways with a trainee because in some cases it's because, yeah, okay, yeah, I don't want that goal, I want this goal, and you're not the person who can help me get there. And in other cases, I want to go there and I say, well, this is what I can do to help you get there. And we came to a difference of opinion that, no, I don't have to do that to get there. I can do this. And there comes a time where ultimately I am responsible in terms of what I'm given from local and federal and other funding that, no, well, I can't do that for you. So if you want that, then you're going to have to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So usually it's been mutual. It's only been in maybe 1.5 cases where it wasn't necessarily the mentee's choice to leave, shall we say.
How do you start that conversation? That's a difficult one to have.
Anyone here see Bull Durham? This is one of the hardest things a manager has to know. The conversation actually started in our individual meetings, but to be perfectly fair, I realized that I couldn't just do it alone, and that we had, and that's why everyone has their department, and their department has graduate studies or postdoctoral studies committees, and so we brought it to that point. And in one case, it was actually the committee who said, because I was saying like, well, I think I need to make the decision after this summer. I'm going to give one more summer. And the committee says, no, actually, we've been watching what you guys have been going through and you've come to us, so we need to end it now. It's not going to work as far as you're concerned. That extra summer is not going to help either of you, so it's time to move on. So it should always be a conversation. It never should be a surprise to one side or the other.
Okay.
And then it's okay. And that goes back to the idea that there should be lines of communication that are open, that don't have to be weekly meetings. But just as long as lines of communication are open, I think that's the most important thing.
I'm going to kind of flip the script as far as us mentoring others. So kind of, can you start at like each level? Because I'm at the level where I'm mentoring undergrads. So
Yeah.
what do you see as like the primary goal in mentoring? Like
Mentoring a
each
mentor?
level?
I mean, that's a key thing. I mean, because I had, when I was starting as an assistant professor, I had people who I went to help me figure out how to be a mentor. Similarly, when I have my postdocs begin to mentor undergrads and grad students, and then my early grad students, I come to some point, is I think, I think it would be nice for you. I think you've reached the point where you can start trying to mentor someone who can help you. And just particularly if in your case, when I have a graduate student start to mentor an undergraduate for the first time, I'm pretty involved. In fact, I'm almost, not ghosting, but really, I say, hey, how are you going to meet with this person? Let's meet together after you've met with them once. What do you think? What are your plans? And I'll kind of say, sure, that plan sounds good. Have you thought about? And then we'll kind of come up with something that works better together. And then I'm always there if they ever have questions, obviously, about one of their mentees. But then eventually I'll kind of back off a little bit more. And it's the graduate school and postdoctoral training it's one of the few apprenticeships that's left, right? And there's always in the apprenticeship, my younger son always says, well, I'm glad I'm not a sushi apprentice because I don't know if I could spend 5 years learning just how to wash rice. But, I mean, in some ways, that's what you're doing as a graduate student. Hopefully, you're doing more than just learning how to wash rice. But that's what happens, is that you try to move things up and continue to build on that. And I'm still doing it. There's still people I go to and ask, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and you've done this, are there some resources, or here's my idea of what I would like to do. So, never ends, which is fun. Yeah.
Thank you for coming. So, for like alignment for expectation between you and your, like, if you hire postdoc to work in your grant, so this is, do you like have like, what kind of professional opportunity you give them to the postdoc? Like, you expecting him to work for like, okay, I'm expecting from you to work for 1 year in my grant. After the 1 year, you can write your own like P award or something like this, or you told them, okay, if you give me like 5 papers, I can, then you can work in your. How do you like? Because when you hire somebody to work in your grant, and like I also, it's like conflict of interest because he wants to be independent and you need him to be dependent. Like
Yeah.
how can you?
So, yeah, that's always the thing. And when people are, especially for postdocs, you know, people who are wanting to start a postdoc, and it depends on, again, the career trajectory. If you want to sit in the chair, you need to eventually go out and saying, this is how I'm going to start my independent career. You have to say, this is going to be what I'm doing now. Maybe I have a K award, but this is my first grant target that I have. And in order to do that, you have to have had an agreement with your mentor that, yeah, I'm going to be able to take something. And it's pretty rare that the postdoc will take something that's totally different from what I do, because otherwise, as you point out, at least initially, they have to start doing really exactly what we do, almost, you know, or it involves a large amount, and then they can kind of branch it out there. And so my advice when people are doing that, you have to see what the previous postdocs who have gone into a particular career trajectory. And again, we're sort of talking very heavily about the academic research career where you actually have to take something and start something. We can talk about, I'll extend to other things. But yeah, initially you have to have something that they're doing that's right smack in the middle of what I'm funded to do, and then try to branch out from there. And getting additional funding, and in some cases I'm fortunate that I do actually have some less restricted funding that allows them to explore off into other areas. But that's also where you get those sort of benchmarks. If I think about it now, all of my postdoc trainees who are running their own labs, one of the reasons that they were able to kind of branch along is that I helped mentor them to K awards, to their own awards, and that's sort of that first stamp that they're ready to kind of move away. It stems from what I'm doing because the Ks have to, you know, there's not enough money for them to just do their own research, but at least they can explore it in a new area. But that's, again, talking very specifically about people who want to do what I do. For other postdocs who are, and I've had some that right away say, I'm not interested in the academic career, but I do need to gather the skill set so that, for example, they have an eye on industry, either from the regulatory standpoint, some have gone onto, some of the, as the staff scientist point of view, in which case they says, I need to get a lot of papers. I don't care if they're on exactly what you're doing. I don't need to have an independent line of research, but I have to show that I've acquired the skills and knowledge that will make me a valuable person for the direction I want to go in. And that's, again, getting back to that idea that we have the conversations early on. And my trainees hate it, because I don't know how often have you heard me say, so what do you want to do?
Every week.
Hey!
It's a good thing.
Just seems like every week. Because I'm not
I guess
here
it
every
does
week.
seem like every week. It's probably not every week.
So, because that's where the expectations come in. And then again, that's where that idea of flexibility and customizing what is the relationship between mentor and mentee.
Yeah, because as a postdoc, you cannot like write R1, so you have to be like researchers.
Right. Although the other piece that is there is you can't write an R1 as a postdoc. But I have also, for people, and again, we're going back to talking about the academic career, people who have been around in my lab for a while, I try to utilize the non-tenure track faculty positions that we have. The undifferentiated research investigator that then moves to the assistant associate staff scientist or research assistant professor associate. And so then they can write grants, and I have encouraged them to do that. And I'm doing that with one, I'd like to say he's a former postdoc. He hasn't moved, he hasn't changed anything. But he's now a research assistant professor, and I'm helping him write his first R21. So, because, you know, I'm not a big fan of having people stay forever in an undifferentiated state. If you can move as far as you can along. And some people don't want the tenure track kind of positions. And we're only now beginning to figure out, especially with this shift towards team science, how do we reward people who don't want to sit in the chair, who actually want to, what are these things? Oh my, oh, that's right, they're for this. You know, who want to use it for more than just typing on a keyboard and picking up the phone. Although everyone knows that I have a headset, so I don't actually have to use my hand, so I can still do this. But yeah.
So if you're asking your trainees on a very frequent basis what they want to do when they grow up, are the answers changing, or is it that they don't know yet and you're going to keep asking it until they define that?
My mentees can feel free to leave the room so they don't hear the answer now. In some cases, the I don't know goes for a long time. And that's okay, as long as we're working together to try to figure out that answer. And then, once that answer is answered once, it still can change. But it does change the direction of what we're trying to do. If someone says, yeah, I really want that tenure track position, then I start doing some things that are a little bit different with that person. I said, well, then we talked for a year about writing a K. Let's write that K. Or, yeah, you have these two, let's get these papers out because it's coming up to September, the ads are coming out, we've got to get you more papers on the CV to make you competitive for these jobs that are coming out. So in some cases the answers will eventually get there, but also in some cases the answers have changed. I had one trainee who says, yeah, for sure, I really, really want your job. I want to do what you do. I want to do what you do. And we started working that way. And then over the course of a couple months, I really don't want to do what you do. So where do we go now? And I didn't just show that person the door. I said, well, let's figure this out. Fine, then what's really important is not you trying to write these little grants. Forget about that. Let's get these papers out to show that you have these skills because you want to go there. So, yeah.
My question is, so it's basically targeted, how do you get your trainees motivated in the lab? I think one big source of motivation would be if you independently achieve a goal that you set yourself. And my question is more specific. So there's always like this fine line, of micromanaging people or basically providing a structure with databases and so on in the lab that everyone can work as a team.
Yeah.
And so how much freedom do you give? And I think also if there are basically procedures worked out in the lab that will contribute to the success of many people. So, yeah.
So, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I'll say it anyway. Is this thing running? Yeah. Okay. It's a bad analogy, but it's the one that popped in my head. I have multiple leashes in my office. Some are longer, some are shorter, some break easy, some will never break. And I try to find Yeah, I told you this is horrible. No, but it really does matter because some people really want a lot of guidance. But I don't want someone who, well, that's not true. I mean, if there's some people who need a lot of guidance the whole time, fine, I'll give it. But then we also have to be we have to come to an agreement. If that's what you need, there's a certain type of career that you're going to have. Okay? And that's where, again, we're going back to having that conversation and trying to customize that relationship. If someone comes in saying that I know exactly the job I want, and say it's like I want to be on a tenure track assistant professorship position as soon as I can, and I have these ideas and we're going to do them. As long as things are working and as long as it fits, then I'm willing to just kind of back away and say, fine, go for it. But still watching, right? Because that's my responsibility.
And how far does this extend to, let's say, organizational systems, so basically database systems that you have in the lab? I mean, some people have a better way of organizing it, and they don't want to succumb to the structure.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. And it's one that I'm still wrestling with. Just as who here uses lab archives? Oh, I heard a groan. Who here has been asked by their PI to use lab archives and refuses? And when you have your lab and you go and ask someone to where their stuff is and who keeps their presentations unboxed so that the lab PI isn't hounding you and he says, oh, shoot, I have to give a talk. I'd love to present some of your data. Where are your slides? You've gone away for, okay. And, so that's something that I'm still wrestling with because my group has become fairly large. My projects are really team-based across multiple PIs on this campus for the most part, but in some cases elsewhere. And it sort of depends. If I'm training people to pursue that model of doing research, there has to be some bending towards the greater good. If someone wants to be the type of scientist who's going to have a small lab group and occasionally collaborate, but collaborating means please send me this and I'll tell you what my results are and then maybe we'll write part of the paper together, then each person can sort of have their own system. But it really depends on how much people are interdependent on access to resources across the way. And if you want to participate in that style, and I'm a big fan of team research, but I know that it involves subjugating a little bit of your personal desires and styles for the greater good. And I've worked with professors on this campus. We've gotten team science grants, and the next one was coming up. And we had the discussion, and my colleague said, yeah, this is great, Vince. We had a good time. I got some papers out that we had a good run. I don't want to do this again because I hate this. And I said, that's fine. And we still go out and we go out to the session room and have beers and talk science and do other things. We just don't work together on those things because it didn't, So, and again, it comes down, if we can sum up this entire discussion, science is done by people, therefore people have to communicate if it's going to be done, in my mind.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
I had another question that's kind of hasn't been touched yet. Among the nurturing trainee aspect of mentoring, I hear also a little bit of mental health. I know a happy person is a productive person.
I need mental health?
And it's also someone who's more likely to have a successful career. And grad school, postdocs, and academia in general is kind of challenging. So how do you ensure that your mentees keep a healthy lifestyle, a healthy work-life balance, and how do you assess and address when it's going downward?
Yeah. That is a critical point. And anyone who's on any of the scientific blogs or sees what's on Twitter, I won't see it on Facebook because I refuse, because Facebook is for my friends and family. So my Twitter life is my professional life. And so a lot of people see me on Twitter. Most people don't know how to find me on Facebook. So I kind of keep that divided. And so that's, for me personally, that right there is an example of, in some cases you have to compartmentalize, and in other ways you have to integrate. But I think that I try to keep things open, that if people have concerns about their personal well-being or their balance, I would like to think that they can come to me. But at the same time, I don't insist that they do. What I do insist is that they let me know if they need to have space for personal reasons, be it personal health reasons, personal mental health, personal social reasons, or other things like that. But it is something that's very important, and it's something that has also sparked some controversy and debate. I think that it's kind of a generational thing no matter what. If I read some of the faculty blogs, they complain about the trainees. I read the trainee blogs, they complain about the mentors, and it's the administrative blogs, they complain about everybody. I'm sorry, that's still on, right? So, yeah, that is something that's very difficult, but it's something that has to be taken care of, because everyone has had personal issues. Again, it goes back to the idea that science is done by people, not by robots. And so that's something that has to be taken into account all the time. So not bringing up specific examples to try to,
Yeah, no, of course.
Oh, so now you want a specific example. Okay.
How do you balance your role as a manager as well as a mentor?
Why do you think they're different, I guess? So where do you see the conflict? That's what I want to see. That's what and then I'll address
Well,
it.
there's the science side, and you can get to where you are by being a great scientist. But also once you start your own lab, there's kind of a feeling of, it's like owning your own business, right?
Mhm.
You have employees, and there's also that kind of HR side.
Yep.
So how do you balance like this new role once you get
Or how do you learn that new role
Or how do you
in
learn
HR?
that?
Well, that goes along because it's part and parcel of the mentoring. So I don't know if you have an undergraduate yet, but when you will, there's going to be those same HR issues. Oh yeah, I know we talked about doing this, but my Frisbee tournament's this weekend, so, and then you have to balance that right away. It's that your role as a manager, if you have your project, as well as the HR person, how much flexibility and what are the expectations as far as lead time in terms of availability or changing someone's change in availability, and how will you deal with that? So you pick it up by experience in some ways, but how do you balance it is that you don't forget that yes, they're sort of like employees, but it is more, I like the idea of what you say of a small business. And the small business that I've joked about is that running a lab is a little bit like running a bed and breakfast, right? Because as the PI, if the toilet overflows, you can't always call the plumber, right? Sometimes you got to get down there and figure things out. Speaking of plumbing, yesterday I was downstairs in one of my anaerobic chambers, and I was sitting with one of my technicians, and we're looking at something. Is this leak? How do we do this? Let's move that in there. So that's what you end up doing. You do end up running a small business, but it's a small business that you really are invested in, and you have to kind of work together as a team.
Do you think it's valuable to get some training to kind of learn those skills for each?
Yeah, but it depends on where you get the training, and some of it is My poor mentees, they shouldn't have had to come here. But occasionally they'll be sitting in the chair and then I go to the bookshelf, right? You guys know, and I'm all about these science self-help books and management books. And some of, and I'll read them out, I'll say, hey, check out this chapter, would you? And what I've learned to do is this, and please give the book back. Or what I do is, there are some books that I use a lot, that there are, 5, 6 copies running around the lab, although sometimes when we can never find one of them, I get a little grumpy. So we all have this lying around. So, and in some cases there are formal training. And I've sent people to the formal training, and there's a lot of it available on campus at no or low cost. And particularly for my more senior trainees, my postdocs, and particularly when they get elevated to research investigator or research assistant professor, I will send them to even more of those because they teach in a more formal way skills such as time management, such as project management, etc. But I also there's also the learning by doing. As we try to write a grant, for example, there's a large grant coming. Hey, let's write this section together. You start it, but let's kind of work together on this and let's figure out how that's done. So again, it's that apprenticeship piece that we have here. But you have to balance how much to do that. I'm sure you could spend all your time going from seminar to seminar to seminar, right? Would Nicole be happy with that? Would you be happy with it? Maybe.
Depends on if there's food.
There's food here. Feel free to refill.
Okay. Do you have, so we're all at younger stages of our career, and well, some of us some of us will move to positions in which we have to mentor people, and mentoring is also a little bit of trial and error, and your first mentees are always kind of the guinea pigs. Is there anything you've done with those first mentees of yours when you started your lab that you can tell us today, don't do that, or do it? Like something that really didn't work, or something that was maybe detrimental to the career's professional development.
I think this goes back to something that I've said before, was assuming that the path that was started when you first established the mentee-mentor relationship was going to be invariant. And it happened a couple times where you asked if things changed. Things changed, but we weren't discussing it, and so the training plan did not fit the direction anymore. And the reason that happened because there wasn't an expectation of continuing that conversation. In one case, a mentee came up to me and said, I thought you'd be disappointed that I changed my mind. I said, no, actually I'm more disappointed that we wasted a little time, both yours and mine. So I think that was, in all cases, the times that I've regretted things is when there wasn't good communication or productive communication, and that was always the difficult piece there.
How do you ensure that communication is productive?
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I knew. I think it involves doing things like asking some poor trainee every week, so what do you want to do? No, I mean, it's that idea is that you kind of keep the lines of communication open, and that you make sure that you aren't the only person giving advice. That's why I think it's important, certainly for the graduate students. I tell them, the reason we assembled your committee was not just so that you get advanced candidacy, but you have different opinions, people with different opinions, different expertise, different resources that you can draw upon. And I encourage this. It's like, if there's something that I can't help you with, then go to one of your committee members. And if it's not one of your committee members, ask me or ask your committee members, is there someplace else I can go? So that the training is basically worthwhile to the trainee. So, because there'll be some things I can't do, no matter how hard I try, that are maybe needed for a given trainee. And so it's my job as the mentor to say, well, I can't do this, but let's find out who can do that for you. Yeah.
So some of that sounds like advice for graduate students to go talk to their committee. But either I'm missing out on something. I don't have a committee as a postdoc.
That's gonna change soon.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
So one of those resources, if my current advisor isn't, the best source for whatever thing that I'm curious about, where do I go?
So some of that depends on the relationship you have with your mentor, because sometimes the mentors don't want you leaving the family to go somewhere else. But we are going to have more formal committees, but in some cases, I've actually often encouraged my postdocs, and partially that's because we do have the team scientists. Hey, you're more interested in the computational side. Why don't you spend more time with this collaborator of mine and go figure out what's going on? And again, that's just the sort of not unusual, but the specific nature of the way a lot of my projects are. Once a month, the entire team gathers. So that's all the PIs and all their trainees. We try to get as many people in the room at one time to try to kind of trade and move things back and forth. Now, if you happen to be in a group that's maybe a little more isolated, that what you have is once a week or every other week, there's the group meeting, which is just the PI and the people who are in that lab, and you feel like you need something else, you should be able to ask your PI, hey, can you let me know where to go? And if they have no idea, you have all your colleagues, right? You have other graduate students, you have the other postdocs, and I know that you guys get together. In fact, there's even groups of assistant professors who get together in different departments to kind of have that cohort of colleagues that are at your stage to kind of find best practices and find resources. And I think that we're fortunate to be on a very large campus with a lot of diverse expertise that you can do that. But again, it kind of stems down to the relationship you have with your mentor. If that's encouraged, and it should never be restricted, but if it is quasi-restricted, then you have to figure out how to deal with that as well. Yeah.
Can you comment on mentoring staff, like
Mhm.
lab technicians, who might
Sure.
not necessarily be in that formal training stage, but they still presumably have career goals
Right.
that they're trying to do?
So, meeting with staff, there is an annual review process there. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there is also an annual review process with the staff. And I do that formally once a year, but as we come approaching that time, I also try to encourage them to say, hey, it's time for the annual reviews coming up in a couple months. Let's start thinking about things that are going on. And for me personally, I actually have a separate lab meeting, which is I have a lot of staff, and so I have just a staff meeting. And at that time, I bring up things that are relevant to the staff, and I also encourage them to, as they're interested in other careers potentially, either shifting within my group or moving on with another group. I think I've left things open enough that my staff have come to me to say that they would like to look for another position because they've kind of reached a certain point that they can't go further on with me. And I would like to hope that this talks about how good the relationship is, that in some cases when they've either failed to move on or decided not to move on, that didn't change our relationship and that we've continued working there. So it's no different. It's just that perhaps that the directions are slightly different, but the way you achieve that isn't different than what it is for the graduate students, postdocs, undergrads, those who want to go to med school or grad school or get a job, immediately after graduating, something like that. So it's all about talking, isn't it? And that's essential. I think when there's a breakdown in communication, no matter what, we see problems. And it doesn't matter if it's politics, medicine, science, family dynamics, personal relationships. That's what it comes down to. I'm the Dr. Phil of science. I guess.
We've talked a little bit about what independence for a postdoc who wants to move toward a faculty position would look like. Can you talk a little bit about what it would look like at other levels of training or for postdocs that do not want faculty position?
Yeah.
How do you encourage this independence?
So it depends on what the goals are. I've had postdocs who wanted to go into industry, in which case, if they've identified the specific branch of industry or things, we look very carefully. We look at, okay, what are the job requirements for this one? And they often are skills-based, so we make sure to get those. In other cases, people are interested in policy and have gone on to other training. Not here, I had someone who went on to, to get an MBA, worked in industry for a while, but the ultimate goal was to get an MBA. I says, well, then let's just get you a job that's in the right field that gives you enough exposure, and then, talk to people in the business school, talk to the entrepreneur groups that we have on campus, and that's the way that's worked. So it involves just making sure that you have access to the skills that you need to pursue the different career path.
So you mostly just point them to all the resources that are available.
Yeah, because I have people that I know, but I don't actually have those resources myself, because I can't really train someone to do something that I'm not doing, but I can help them figure out, based on the experience of other trainees and some of my friends' trainees and some of my friends themselves as they've moved into different career paths, how did they get there, and have them talk with them as well and find out from them.
I think it's about time to wrap this up.
Any final burning questions that anyone has? No?
So thank you so much for
Sure.
taking the time.